Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cross the Line, WFUV's tennis podcast. I'm Mary Hawthorn, joined by Gabby Price and Grace McCarron, here to talk about all things Roland Garros. But before we get started, how is everybody doing this Friday?
I can start. I'm doing pretty good. I just to have it on all day, and then they start replaying the matches that happen too early in the morning or playing it at night. So it's so fun. Like my family, like every time I walk in the house, like the TV's on playing tennis. So it's kind of awesome, and I love the summer. I love this time of year.
Yeah, I'm doing good. I woke up this morning and immediately put on Tommy Paul's match, which he closed out. That was an exciting five-setter. So kind of the same vein as Gabby. Like I love waking up in the morning and like tennis is already on because I don't wake up that early. So it's already like 4 o'clock in Paris. So the matches are like in full swing. So it's a lot of fun. Excited to talk a little bit of French Open now that we're almost through the first week as well.
No, definitely. It's funny, my parents have set like their alarms to, 5 a.m., 4 a.m. to try to see some of these matches. But it's awesome. I feel like it really is the best time of year and just the perfect start to summer. But on that note, for those that do not know, Roland Garros is the second Grand Slam of the year and takes place in Paris, France. The tournament is in full swing as of right now, having started earlier this week. And things are different this year as it's the first time without Rafael Nadal, 14-time French Open champion, who has retired and is unfortunately not playing in this tournament. However, just last weekend, Rafa was honored on Philippe Chatrier among Novak Djokovic, Roger Federer, and Andy Murray, with his footprint being marked on the court forever. So I thought it was a beautiful ceremony. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts were on the celebration of Rafa.
Yeah, it was very sweet. I did not see it in live time, unfortunately, but seeing all the clips on social media of the four of them, notably for me was Nadal's son. Nadal's son is probably one of the cutest children I've ever seen in my entire life. And the way he interacts with like the crowd and the Djokovic and all those other guys, like it's just so cute. But yeah, the plaque on the ground is so cool, and the fact that it's his foot, I don't know, it like it's so like cool and historic, and like I don't know, it like gives me chills almost. But the ceremony itself was really nice. Rafa clearly appreciated it, and I'm just happy that they were able to honor him in this way since his career was so long and historic and just important to Paris and to the tour as a whole.
Yeah, I loved it. Seeing the four of them all together, it feels like it's been a long time since they were like all on the tour at the same time. I was actually trying to think of like the last year that they were all on the tour at once, and it like wasn't coming to me because it's been a while since like at least Andy Murray was around. So it was like crazy to see that, and they obviously have so much respect for each other. They're obviously also really great friends, which is really cool to see. I also saw a couple of days after the ceremony, there was like a clip of a ball boy next to Rafa's plaque, like clearing it off. And I thought that was so sweet.
It was so
So
sweet.
it was a yeah, it was just like a really cool moment and he totally deserved it. I also thought it was the plaque was a really like unique way to honor him because they do have like the statue of him on the grounds there. I don't know how long that's been there. I think it's been up there for a little while, at least a year, but this was just a really cool way because that was like his court for so many years, as we said. So overall, I just thought it was awesome and I thought the French Open people pulled it off really nicely.
Yeah, I was surprised that they did something like that. I think he totally deserves it. And his reaction, with so many tears, having his family there, I think was really sweet. But I was surprised that on X and Instagram too, I saw some controversy regarding the presence of Andy Murray. They said it's not the big four, it's the big three because, Novak, Roger, and Rafa have 20 plus Grand Slams and Andy has under five. So I was curious what your guys' thoughts were on that. I think it's definitely safe to say that they're the big four. I think they've all made their mark in such a unique way. But I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on that. Or maybe should we just not even make it a thing?
Yeah, I think for me, I go back and forth. I think a couple of years ago, I would have totally agreed with you, Mary, and been like big four all the way. But I feel like those people are true. Where like Andy just did not have the same career as the other three. The other three played for longer and had way more success throughout their career. I don't know how Andy did it, honestly, that he was able to get himself into this big four situation. But like he's a great player. He was really fun to watch when he was on the tour. Like I'm not trying to say anything. I loved watching him when he was playing, but I just think it's fascinating how it is the big four when it probably is just the big three. Like I don't know. Like it's such an interesting conversation because like looking at even the stats and everything, and even just like sometimes his presence on the court, like he matched Djokovic a little bit more, and that he wasn't always the best sportsmanship person. Whereas you look at like Federer or Nadal, and it's like they barely have broken rackets in their career. Rafa never has. So, yeah, I don't know if I would put Andy in there, but I don't think you could do the ceremony without him since it is a conversation of the big four. So I'm not mad that he was there, but in the overall conversation of it, that's how I feel.
Yeah, so I kind of agree. Like obviously the level of the other three's accomplishments is like so much bigger numerically and like the legacy that they're going to have on tennis. But I do think, Gabby, you kind of touched on it. Like, it was so impressive that Andy even managed to win three slams during that time because, like, and we'll get into this, but like, there's a whole group of players who basically haven't won a slam because the three of them were like in existence at the same time. So, just the fact that Andy managed to win it three times and he did it twice at I think twice at Wimbledon. Um, which is his home country, obviously. Like that was pretty awesome for him. And I do think it would have been a little bit weird if he wasn't at the ceremony just because it was mostly those three, but it was in a sense those four for all of those years. Because, if somehow like the three of them weren't going to win it, well, maybe Andy will win it. It was kind of that vibe. Obviously not that he was at the same level as the three of them, but I think there's a little bit of a rivalry there. And I was glad to see him there. I think it was more for like my nostalgia purposes that I was like, yes, Andy Murray has to be there. Because honestly, like I never really thought of like his rivalries with the others as like one of the big, huge tennis rivalries. Obviously when you have like Roger and Rafa and then Rafa and Djokovic and Roger and Djokovic, it's like tough to match those. But yeah, I love Andy Murray. I love that he was there, and I do like he does obviously hold a piece of tennis history alongside these three in like the 2010s. That was their decade. But yeah, I can see why some people might be a little bit like purist about it and be like, no, it should like it's those three plus Andy.
Totally. I was conflicted. I feel like I never want to disrespect Andy Murray because he was an incredible tennis player, but he's just not at the caliber of, Roger and Novak and Rafa. But I don't know. I think it was good that they were all there. I like how you put it, Grace, in the sense that they all deserve to be there. And I think it was so cool for tennis fans just to see so many legends all together. So I loved it. But something that we mentioned that I think will be a perfect segue to our next sort of segment is this idea that the big four, or really the big three, whatever, were dominating the court. They never let room for sort of 90s players to shine or players born in the 90s to shine. The New York Times recently put out an article about the twilight of tennis, and they coined this term, the tennis sandwich generation. And in short, they talk about how, the big three, the big four were dominating, Grand Slam tournaments. And now we have this sort of new generation of Gen Z, Alcaraz, Sinner, now Jack Draper, even. I don't even know if we can put him in that category just yet. But there's this gap of players born in the 90s that never really had their chance to shine or win majors because of, Novak and Roger and Rafa. So some of the players they mentioned, were Zverev, Berrettini, Rude, just to name a few. But I was curious what your guys' thoughts were on this sort of lost legacy in men's tennis, particularly.
I think it's absolutely true. I think the list that they put together is very true. Tsitsipas, Medvedev, all these players. I feel like when they came out on tour, it was like new amazing player, like going to be a contender for Grand Slams, and they were, but they just never quite got there. One that I wanted to add to that list, though, that is not on there already, Taylor Fritz. I think he was born in 1997, has never won a slam, has been around for what feels like ever, or at least like, I don't know, the past like 5 to 7 years, right? Like he's been around for a while. He's still young. Um, he's 27, but he's never quite gotten there. And I think that's part, like, I think it's definitely a credit to Rafa and all them on tour. And now looking at Sinner, Alcaraz, and these other guys who are kind of coming in and sweeping the slams. But he's another one, like, and I think as an American especially, we always kind of want to root for the Americans, let the Americans get to that stage. An American man hasn't won a slam in how long? Was Ben Shelton the last one? Like, but he was one of the ones that was like making it popular again. So I think Taylor Fritz kind of got lost in that 90s generation as well. And that it would be really great if he could get a slam, but just because of it's so interesting that this like middle tier of players is just kind of getting moved around by these super dominant forces. And I was actually talking to my mom the other day kind of about the same thing, except I had not read the article, Mary, so it was interesting that you sent it. And it almost seems like these superstars, it skips a generation every time that happens. Like we had the Rafa, Djokovic, and all, and Djokovic is somehow like he's still around 2 generations later. Who knows how? But it skipped like the Tsitsipas, the 90s generation, and now it's back for like the whatever, like 2000s, the players who are now like 21, 22 right now. So I think it's super interesting, and I think it's definitely true.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I was actually pondering this earlier. I do think there's kind of like different tiers to this generation because I like Medvedev and Dominic Thiem, who has retired. They are the only two players born in the 90s to have won a slam. Like, I feel like they're kind of at the top tier of this generation. And then there's like Alex Zverev, who has made multiple slam finals, hasn't won one. And then there's players like Matteo Berrettini, who has been definitely, I think, like thwarted by injury. He's dropped out of the past two Grand Slams. So the French Open that's happening now and Australia. He's had a lot of like surgeries. And he made the Wimbledon final in 2021, but that was against Djokovic, so like not really gonna stand a chance there. Unfortunately, that was a crazy season for Djokovic. So I do think there's different levels to it. I feel like for some reason to me, Casper Ruud, I believe is 26 or 27, he still feels like he could pull it off to me, even though he did just lose in the first round of the French Open. But he does feel like he could just because he has made a major final like pretty recently. So that's kind of an not an outlier to me. Like I do agree with this concept, but he's a little bit of an outlier. But I think there are tiers to this. And yeah, like Medvedev, I did kind of expect him to win a bunch more slams, but then like Alcaraz and Sinner kind of just came like crashing in and like nobody else was going to be winning some of those. Like they have won the past between the two of them have won the past five slams. certainly would expect that to go on to a 6-1 at the end of this French Open. So I think this is a really interesting concept, though, and I think it's cool, Gabby, how you guys were talking about how they keep skipping generations as well. So overall, I like this concept a lot. It is kind of weird to see it play out, like because it really does keep happening that all of these players that you think are going to win slams now that like, oh, Roger and Rafa are done, Djokovic is like stalling a little bit. It's been a while since he won a slam. It's interesting to see how they just now it's like, oh, Alcaraz and Sinner are here, like there it goes again.
No, definitely. Somebody on, well, first off, I looked up all of the players that lost just to Novak in a Grand Slam final, and I was shocked. I mean, we have Ruud in 2023, Dominic Thiem 2020, Nick Kyrgios 2022 Wimbledon, Berrettini, as you said, Grace, Wimbledon 2021, and then Medvedev twice, the Australian Open in 2021, US Open 2023. But then someone that I forgot about, that I have expressed my disapproval of, is Stefanos Tsitsipas. I did not realize that he lost to Djokovic in the French Open final in 2021 and Australian Open 2023. So I feel like he's another person that, has definitely proven himself on the court, incredibly talented, but ultimately kind of never was able to break through because of players, I think, like, Novak and Roger. But on that note, I think a quick segue that we could do, someone that I've heard a lot of positive rhetoric around is Fonseca. Have you seen any of his matches recently? I know he's playing Jack Draper tomorrow at 7:20, and Draper's ranked number 5. But I heard that he has a insanely large crowd fan base there with him in France. That some of the commentators, I think McEnroe said he's never seen something like it since Nadal. So I think he might be, another uh, maybe shining star, Gen Z's next best, maybe in this tournament. So I think he's someone we have to look out for as well. But I think it's time that we segue to the women's side of the French Open. They've just completed week one, and there have been a lot of upsets, a lot of great matches. To start off, there was a tough loss for Naomi Osaka, who was defeated by Paula Badosa, who's ranked number 10. She shared a very emotional interview afterwards. She suffered from injury, some mental health battles, but has ultimately persevered and really continued to shine on the court. But she's struggling as of right now. I was curious what your guys' thoughts were on that match and maybe even thoughts on the interview as well.
Yeah, I feel like Osaka's kind of been in a tough spot the last couple tournaments that she's played in. Obviously, still coming back from her hiatus and everything. Her interview is very sweet. She had, I feel like, a good couple rapport with the reporters who were asking her very thoughtful questions and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of tough to see her struggle like this. She's always really fun to watch, but she's just not quite at where she used to be. And so this really wasn't that great of a match for her, and obviously a first round loss is always disappointing to a player of a caliber, and she has very high expectations for herself. So seeing that happen always tough, but I think it'll make her come back stronger in at Wimbledon and when we see her in New York.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised by the outcome of this match, just because Paula Badosa has been really good in the past couple of years, and obviously Osaka has been struggling, and it's also not her best surface on clay. But yeah, her interview did kind of make me sad because, like, we remember a few years ago where she was like a force. I mean, the first slam was now, I guess, almost 7 years ago, which is kind of alarming. That time went by that fast, but that was like the really controversial US Open final with Serena. And then she went on to win three other slams, two in Australia and another US Open. So I remember like she was one of those players where like if you face her, in a semifinal or final, like, be scared. And now I feel like that's kind of waned. And not, well, obviously, the mental health stuff is not her fault. And I think that hiatus was a very good move by her. So I loved watching her back then. I hope she can return to that now. But as for Badosa, she's been killing it recently, so happy for her. She could be a sneak pick in this tournament. But yeah, I look forward to seeing Naomi get better and get back to her, hopefully what she was at a few years ago.
No, definitely. I'm excited to see um, how Badosa plays. I believe she's playing tomorrow. So I'm excited to see the outcome of that match because I definitely think she's going to make her way through this tournament. This morning, however, we had some exciting matches. I think predicted outcomes generally. Swiatek, Rybakina, and Sabalenka all won their matches this morning. They were expected to win, really shined. Two setters, very exciting. I think Sabalenka has definitely been dominating thus far, although she did have a challenging second set where she won 7-6. And then, of course, we have Coco Gauff, who has been dominating this tournament, winning incredibly easily, moving quickly on clay, really showing that hard court isn't just where she shines, but it's also clay as well. So I was curious what your guys' thoughts were on some of these women or even Gauff, and generally sort of the direction you think, the tournament's going.
Yeah, first we have not talked about Rybakina, sorry, on the pod yet, but she's someone who I also really like. I think she's also been really good the past couple of years. And I don't know, I just really like her style of play. And I thought this win over Ostapenko, who was a really solid player on the tour, and usually someone that's, you face her and the outcome can go either way. But this was a very dominant win for her, winning 6-2, 6-2. And I just want to highlight again, talking about Iga. Iga is definitely favored to win this tournament, but she plays Iga this Sunday. That is going to be a good match to watch for the third round too. Kind of crazy. The way that Iga has been playing, she might have the upper hand here, but if Rybakina takes her out, like, I'll just put it this way, I won't be mad about it. But then let me go ahead and talk about my winner pick that I said last week, Sabalenka. She's killing the game, guys. I'm not worried about her at all. She has played two, say, fairly easy matches, very decisive wins. So really like what she's doing on the clay. I think her and Iga, seeing them together at the end of this is a very real possibility. And not to take out Coco of the equation, I think she's looked great this far. As we know, clay isn't her best surface, and compared to someone like Iga, maybe Iga might have a little bit of an upper hand on her. But I do think you could see at this point, obviously we still have a lot of tennis to play in this tournament, but I do think at this point, Coco get into the semis, like, yeah, I think that could happen.
Yeah, it feels to me Iga is as per usual in the French Open. Like she's inevitable. She hasn't dropped a set yet, which I feel like she's done that at several French Opens, and then she goes on to win the whole thing and like drops maybe one set in the 2 weeks. And I'm just like, that's just it's unreal. What she does. And she's not even, we talked about it, I think, on our first episode a little bit. Like this hasn't been her best season so far. So I was thinking like, okay, maybe this is the opportunity for someone like Coco, like Sabalenka, who might win anyway, but someone else to take the French Open when it's just been impossible the last few years, but now it's kind of looking like the same thing, as usual. But I would never count out, as Gabby was saying, I would never count out Sabalenka because her game is so strong. And I feel like she's always lurking. Like sometimes I am like, oh, Iga's gonna blah blah blah, and then she just appears, and I'm like, right, she's really, really good. And I love watching her play. But that said, I'm still hoping Coco can pull it off because kind of want her to get that revenge from the French Open. Not, I mean, revenge, but like kind of want her to get back on that French Open final that she lost a couple of years ago, I think it was. But yeah, people like Rybakina, who won Wimbledon 40, that was a while ago now too. I'm like so turned around with the years, but she won. That was a fantastic tournament for her. And then Ostapenko, like that's a really interesting match to me because Ostapenko, now that's 8 years ago, but she won the French Open back then, and she's still trucking along almost 10 years later at a high level. So that's awesome. Obviously, Rybakina takes that one, but overall, my point is there's a lot of really, really strong women in the field right now, and so excited to see the rest of this tournament, but I think as of now, I would predict that Iga is going to win.
I did not realize that she had not lost a single set in this tournament. I think that is key to seeing maybe the projection of how the rest of this tournament goes. Wow, I did not know that. Um, I think I'm definitely, I don't know. As you said, there are so many players that are proving themselves on clay, like Badosa, like Swiatek, Sabalenka, Goff. I really don't know how this is going to go, and I feel like that's a little bit different, maybe from some of the past few majors, the Australian Open and even last year's US Open. I felt like you kind of saw the direction for which the tournament was going, but here I feel like there's so many really strong forces. But in regards to American players, we have an exciting match on the women's side. Madison Keys versus Kenin, who was the 2020 WTA Player of the Year. Uh, I really don't know how this match could go. I mean, I know we saw Keys dominate at the Australian Open this year as the women's singles title winner. But, Kenin has definitely proven herself over the past few years. But I think regardless of the outcome, it's going to be a great match because we have two fabulous American women playing each other. And then additionally, this weekend, we have Andreeva, the Indian Wells winner this year, versus Putin who's a very talented singles player from the baseline. I mean, her forehand is so strong. She had a great run at the US Open this year, uh, but a little controversy with some of her treatment of ball kids. I don't know if you saw that TikTok video of her where she's asking the ball kids for like a tennis ball, and then she just like swats them away and is so unbelievably disrespectful. So since then, I haven't necessarily been the biggest fan of her based on, her court presence. But I think regardless, it'll be a good match this weekend because I think Andreeva will make it far in this tournament, or hopefully will, considering she's been doing well. But anyway, why don't for our last segment we shift gears over to the men's side? Uh, their first week concluded, of course. We had several upsets. I know we mentioned Taylor Fritz before. He was eliminated in round one. We also saw Casper Ruud be defeated in round one. And then we've seen some crazy matches from Tommy Paul, who just had a five-setter with a hip injury down the first two sets, was able to fight back. And then we have Fonseca, who we mentioned before. But I'm curious, thoughts on any matches thus far on the men's side, any particular players that are standing out, any surprises, really wherever we want to take this.
I was really bummed about Rude, guys. He obviously coming off the Madrid Open too. I was so excited for him. This is going to be a great tournament for him. At least, like, even if we are a little nervous about him winning or taking it all the way, like at least getting to like third, fourth round, like that would be a decent tournament for him. First round, my guy, what happened? Um, that's kind of tough. And then bringing it back to Fritz, first round loss again. It just like it really does make me like Fritz is not our American guy. Like I hate to say it, like he's just not. I think we now really have to look at Tommy Paul and Clay also just is not an American surface. We know that it's not entirely unexpected. It just like kind of stinks that they're so high up in the rankings and they're still having these first round losses. Not that a little upset isn't fun. We love it. Just kind of tough to see. And as I at least like to see our American players thrive. Um, but I think Jack Draper has been having a really good tournament. He's had a couple tough four set matches, but it's great to see him kind of getting past those. He had a good match with Monfils. I don't know if you guys caught
Yes,
any of that.
that was so
He
good.
Monfils is so good too, and he's another one where like you like to see him do really well. He's been on the tour forever. Also, like I don't know how he's still hanging around. I think I was told today he's 38. I think
Wow.
might need to double check that, but he's definitely up there. And the fact that he's still playing four set matches against Jack Draper, who's in his early 20s, very impressive. He's still so athletic, which is his matches are always so fun to watch. So that was a good one, but a good win for Jack Draper nonetheless. Um, but yeah, I think this tournament for on the men's side is shaping up a little bit how we expected it to. Novak hasn't had any problems yet, which is interesting to me. I feel like when we talk about Djokovic too, he's someone that thrives in a slam setting. So like he could have a bad off season, put him in any major, and he's making it like at least minimum fourth round, which is just it's very interesting to see because as we've talked about, he kind of went MIA for a while. Um, but there's another American matchup on the men's side, Korda and Tiafo. That's a good one that I will absolutely mark my calendar for as well because I think that one could be anyone's game to take as well. Korda has kind of been a little bit more of a favorite for me personally, but Tiafo is so fun to watch, and it would be really fun to see him make the fourth round in this tournament. But yeah, I think there's been a lot of good matches. And I think right now, the player who I'm watching the most, Mary mentioned already, Tommy Paul.
Yes.
I really like Tommy Paul right now.
Yeah, definitely a lot of people to keep an eye on. I was just thinking about Francis Tiafoe when you talked about like Taylor Fritz is like not the American guy who's gonna do it. I would put up Tommy Paul with him and or Tommy Paul and Francis Tiafoe as like the two that I think are the most likely at this point. Not necessarily in this tournament. I am keeping an eye on Tommy Paul, but Tiafoe made a statement at the US Open last year, and that's like the kind of environment to me, from what I watched of his run there last year, that he like thrives in. So definitely once we get to August, I'm gonna be keeping an eye on him to possibly like go to the final, maybe even win it, depending on where everybody else is. But yeah, Taylor Fritz out round one was surprising. But Casper Ruud out round one was like, whoa. Like not that was not great for him. But I am excited for this Fonseca and Jack Draper. Sorry, I just blanked. But Jack Draper match. I always find like with the people you were talking about, Mary, like the fan base that he has at his matches, like Brazil fans, I feel like are like a different breed. Like they will show up for their person, which is so cool to see, especially because I feel like there's not like in recent years, not a ton of like really strong players from Brazil. So also learned that Fonseca is younger than me, so that was a terrifying fact to learn. But
Wait, how old is he?
basically, he was born in 2006. He's 18. Isn't that horrifying?
Oh my god.
Yeah,
Okay,
I know. I
that's
know.
insane.
I was thinking like, oh, maybe 2003. Like, no, 2006.
Six.
That was just a horrifying fact.
Hmm.
But overall, lots of men to keep an eye on. I am also keeping an eye on Tommy Paul after his match this morning. I'm hoping that injury doesn't linger. He was obviously struggling a little bit at the end of the fifth set versus Karen Khachanov, who played a great match, and he's very good. He's been around a while too. But I'm keeping an eye on Tommy Paul. Maybe he could challenge Sinner and Alcaraz. You never know.
I agree with you. I think Tommy Paul's win today against Karen Khachanov showed that he can like make it to the final of this tournament, like if he continues to play this consistently. Um, Especially with his all his injuries. Like the fact that he was down two sets, had a serious hip problem, and then was able to really just like persevere through it, definitely has me thinking he is one of the top American players, in addition to, Tiafoe. I agree with that. I don't know where Ben Shelton's going to go in this tournament in the sense that he's been playing well, but we know clay is not his surface. He thrives in that US Open environment. He's said it time and time again that being around American fans, really drives him and motivates him to play his best. So I'm excited to see him, of course, at the Open in late August. But something I quickly wanted to mention, and I know we don't have much time left, is at the Madrid Open, Fonseca and Paul faced one another. And I know it's, 2 out of 3 sets, but Paul won the first set 7-6. The tiebreak score was 9-7. And then in the second set, Paul won again in a tiebreak, so 7-6. And then the score was 7-3. So the fact that they are playing at the level where it's that close is exciting to me. Like, I would love to see them potentially have a matchup in the near future. I know they're probably not going to play in this tournament, but just exciting that we see somebody so young who's 18 years old literally playing at the level of Tommy Paul, where there's literally like a point difference. So anyway, with that being said, there's still so much more tennis to be played at the French Open. We have a lot of exciting matches today, the rest of the weekend, and then all throughout next week. So we will be sure to keep you posted on all Roland Garros updates. So with that being said, this was our third episode of Cross the Line, a production of WFUV Sports.